'79, I realized I was a crummy employee and needed to do something on my own because I didn't take orders very well, and became a headhunter. And in '84, got the first assignment that resembles the kind of work that we do now. We were the first company in Southern California to rent a recruiter to sit inside somebody else's office and do the recruiting until it got done and then leave. And so I did the first project myself, and all sorts of lights went off in my brain. I thought, this is a wonderful way to do recruiting. And I was able to sell some more projects, and then I had to hire somebody. And the first person I hired was, for all intents and purposes, a felon. The guy was a thug. He was an ex-Navy chief. Not meaning to disparage Navy chiefs. But was worse about taking orders than I was, which is kind of interesting for a Navy chief. And I realized over time that I just made a really terrible mistake by hiring this guy. And in time, he went away. So when Ann and I were first talking about chatting with you folks today, she said that experience was not unique to me, and that perhaps some of you had had that experience with your early hires, in your innocence and your naivete were not all that they might have been, and asked that I talk about how you might avoid making those sorts of mistakes. So we're going to talk about initially what a good hire is. So you have a target to aim at. What are the characteristics of a good hire? And then we're going to talk secondly about how you can, what sort of thought process you might go through in order to decide when it's time to hire your first person, which tasks and responsibilities you should delegate off to this first person. The theme through all of this is going to be the application of quantitative methods to recruiting, which is not a usual approach. But I realized about 10 years ago that the recruiting we were doing for our clients was in some days really successful. When people stayed and the client was happy and the employees were happy, and 5 years later they were still there and everybody thought it was great. And in other cases they turned over with remarkable speed, disturbing speed. And I realized that, first of all, that we didn't have a whole lot to do with that, because we were providing the same level of service to companies that were doing well and that had little turnover, and companies that were doing badly had a lot of turnover. But I also realized that we should start to find some way to be more helpful insofar as the selection decision was concerned. And as I thought about that, I realized that the primary characteristic of the selection decision was incredibly amorphous. The information that people had about the candidates was frequently in prose, it was rambling, it was evocative. You felt really good when you read the headhunter's report on a candidate, but you really hadn't learned anything very specific about the person. And you certainly had not learned very much about the match between what the individual was and what your requirements were. And so it started dawning on me that virtually every other part of business, and certainly engineering and certainly science, was all quantitative based. So why didn't I start looking at some of the tools that folks use outside of HR, outside of recruiting, and seeing how we could apply them to recruiting and see if that didn't help make things clearer to us. Well, I got a note the other day from one of our clients, a CIO of a paper distributor, who said that he knew from our write-ups who he was going to hire. They were so vivid and so clear, and the people just leapt off the page, that he knew whom he wanted to hire before he even interviewed them. And the interview was then just a confirmation exercise. So I think we have, in fact, made some progress about this. So what we'll be talking about today is how to get your arms around how to make a good hire, and there will be a quantitative get your arms around what you might want to delegate. Am I audible to you guys in the back? Cool, thank you.
There is a mic there, Tom, you could.
Great, thanks, Jeff. So, first of all, sort of the background. This is a survey that we did about satisfaction with recruiting. The bars, the salmon-colored bars, are how important each one of those elements is, and where the line passes through the bar is how well hiring managers that we surveyed felt they were being served insofar as each one of those elements was concerned. And we did the same survey 25 years ago, and then this was done about 5 years ago. And you can see that the average service is really pretty lousy compared to how important the hiring managers thought it was. So if you have had bad experience with recruiting, please don't feel alone. Know that this is a common experience, but that there are ways to make this all make sense. So what are the components of a good hire? First of all, that the job design is correct. We'll chat about that for a sec. Second is that the process is correct. Third of all, that the candidates are good candidates, that they actually have the skills and experiences that you're looking for. Next, that the hiring decision that you make delivers somebody into your organization that has, in fact, all of the fit elements that you're looking for. And then if all of those are present, what should occur is you should have a superior employee who does fine work on the job. So the first issue is the job design. So what makes a successful employee? Lots of employees have the same characteristics to varying degrees. Successful employees tend to have more of certain ones and sometimes less of certain ones. And you can find out statistically what if you had a pool of employees, and I want to acknowledge that this is not exactly on the point because you all don't have a pool, and we'll get back to small companies in a sec. But if you do have a pool, you can start to understand what characteristics are associated with people being successful in the job and what characteristics are not associated. So to do that, you've got to gather a certain amount of employee data, which means that you have to do the data collection in a structured, quantitative way. And then you start to look at the top performers and the bottom performers and understand what the differences are between the two. And you can see that those two blue boxes show you that the top performers have characteristics that the bottom performers just simply do not uniformly have. So then you can, of course, hire people who have those characteristics that you identified correlate to top performance. So as a new entrepreneur, where you don't have hundreds and hundreds of employees to go and do this kind of analysis on, you can do this informally, retrospectively, by just thinking back over your career about what characteristics people have had who, when they were around you, did good work, and that's a good start. We don't need to go into this much detail. So the second one, the second aspect of job design is that the people you're looking for actually exist. You might think this is a silly requirement, but you would be stunned, or at least I have been stunned, by the number of CEOs who want somebody who just simply does not exist. They want an actuary who can tell jokes. There are no actuaries who can tell jokes. So you can want them all day long. You can hire Hydrica Struggles, you can hire the Wentworth company, you can hire whoever you want. You're not going to get an actuary who tells jokes. So it's really important that you understand that, establish that people exist before you start doing a lot of work on the recruiting. Otherwise, the recruiting is just this uphill grind, which is like the myth of Sisyphus. You're going to get to the top and then roll the rock down the other side because there are no actuaries who tell jokes. So this is an illustration of how we look at this. We'll go out into the labor market. Somebody gave me this job description and said, "You guys want to work on this?" And I looked at it and thought, this this is a job description for an entire department, not a person. There is no one who has all this. So we went out, looked at a bunch of resumes. Sorry. The light green has what the client wants. The dark green has more than what the client wants. The red doesn't have what the client wants. So you can see that the very best person is missing 4 critical skills, and that the labor market looks worse as you move to the right. So we happily stepped aside and didn't take the search, because all we were going to do is get the client mad at us, because there wasn't anybody out there who they were going to find successful. You also need to start to establish whether you can get the people that you want for the pay that you want to pay before you start. It is just really frustrating to get out of the marketplace, fall in love with somebody, and discover after you've fallen in love with them that they're 20 grand more than what your budget says. We have an internal rule about avoiding unrequited love, because unrequited love turns everybody into monsters. So you want to know that ahead of time, and this is an example of the tool that we use to do it. We quantify requirements, we quantify how well candidates have each of the requirements on a 1 through 5 scale. We will then average that score, plot it against their compensation, and you get a picture like this. And by doing something like this, and this is all stuff that you all with engineering backgrounds or manufacturing backgrounds can do on the back of an envelope. This is not heavy lifting. But when you do this, you start to see who's out in the marketplace. You're not just looking to see if the person you want is there. You want to know on either side of them. So you start to see what your alternatives are. Because maybe there's a really good population of people who are slightly lighter or slightly heavier, and you can reconfigure some of your jobs so that you end up wanting to hire people who A, exist, and B, you can afford. The third piece of the job profile has to accomplish is to describe people who want to work for you. So it's good before you get too deep into the recruiting to go out and talk to 2 or 3 or 4 people and find out if anybody is even remotely interested in coming to work for your company. I'm a fairly little company, and the people at Hydrant Struggles, your brother, my friend Tim O'Shea, would no more come to work for the Wentworth company than would flap their arms and fly. So my trying to recruit your brother from Hydrant is just silly. And all I'm going to do is embarrass myself and feel bruised afterwards. So it's good to find out ahead of time. Here's an example where we were looking for some programmers, and they were in every city other than Portland. The job was in Portland. The client wanted them to move to Portland. It was in the depths of the recession. They didn't want to move because they thought if we get to this company whom we don't know, in Portland, a city that we've never been before, and the job doesn't work out, what am I going to do? The answer was give them 2-year guaranteed employment contracts, and that's what this client did, and was able to bring these technical folks to Portland. A controversial strategy, but the data allowed you to see into the problem and figure out a solution to it.